It's incredible. When kids begin to co-author their learning, you see the level of engagement just go through the roof. And that's because they're like, you're saying I have a voice, that I can participate, learn, know what I know, express what I don't know, and then lay out a plan for me. That's, how could I not want to be a part of that?
I'm Nikki Herta, and this is Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms, a podcast where we celebrate our state's educators and explore the future of learning. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, insuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. In today's episode of Bright, I chat with Dr. Dave Richards, an executive learning strategist for Michigan Virtual, former superintendent of Fraser Public Schools, and one of the founding members of the Future of Learning Council, a group of Michigan school leaders dedicated to redefining learning to better meet the needs of our students. Dave shares his personal story of how school transformed his life as someone who was born into extreme poverty, articulates a vision for what learning can be at its finest, and of course, offers 3 strategies for reinventing learning in your school community. It's a pleasure to have you on the Bright podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely, Nikki. I am so excited to be here.
We're starting off season 3 by asking everybody, can you tell me about the most interesting project that you're working on professionally right now?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I think the launch of the Future Learning Council for me is incredibly exciting. That is a group that we started back when I was a superintendent in Fraser in 2017 as the Michigan Competency Consortium. And coming out of the pandemic, we realized that the challenges for our leaders was so much bigger than just talking about competency-based ed, that we renamed it, and with the support of Michigan Virtual, really coming along beside these school districts, it turned into the future of learning, because all things learning seem to be on the table for consideration right now. So for me, passionately, I love working with leaders, helping them to build capacity themselves, but also helping their districts to really set a clear vision, a shared vision for what is learning today and where is learning going, and then how do we navigate that, because it's been so disruptive, especially because of the pandemic, that districts are really looking for that extra insight on where do we go from here. So the Future Learning Council for me, I'm excited. I believe the sky's the limit with what we can do in Michigan and putting Michigan on a national stage around learning.
Yes, and I've been lucky enough to sit in on a couple of those conversations, and I always leave just feeling a lot more hopeful. So I appreciate the work that you all are doing there to move learning forward. So thank you so much. Can you tell me about a moment in time when you fell in love with education?
That's such a great question, because it really causes you to reflect and go back in time. And very honestly, for me, it started in high school. I never had the thought, well, I want to be a teacher in high school. But honestly, I grew up in pretty extreme poverty. I mean, I was a kid that we moved like 19 times before I got out of high school. And so school was my safe place. It was a place where I knew there would be adults that cared about me. There would be a solid meal every day. I had my friends, I had the social, and I was not academically driven at all. But all those SEL needs that we talk about, that's very real. That's where kids get a lot of that validation. And that's where I really started hearing adults tell me, listen, you can break the cycle of poverty. You don't have to settle for what you've known. You can be whatever you want to be if you're willing to work. And so it was really the teachers in my life. And I still have relationships with them today that I connect, and we get Christmas cards from each other because they changed my path. And so for me, having the opportunity to go back into education, become a teacher, especially as a high school principal, and to see kids in that hallway and go, I know what you need, and I'm that guy. I'm going to help you get it. And I'm going to high five you today. And I'm going to tell you that I love you, even though you may think that's weird for a high school principal to tell you that he loves you and cares about you. I'm going to do it because I want you to have the same belief that you can change, you can be, and you can have whatever it is you want in life. And that to me was the game changer for me. So when I reflected on that question, Nikki, it was really, it's my roots and it's going home. And so it was a no-brainer for me to go into education. Could have made a lot more money, probably doing a lot of other things and drive, but it's a life changer. It's a calling. Most educators will tell you it's a calling. And when you answer that call, it's easy because kids are amazing. And the chance to work with them every day it's a true blessing. So yeah, that's where I started.
I really appreciate you sharing that because I've
Yeah.
known you for a couple years now and I hadn't heard that story.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's a pretty critical part of who you are as an educator. I'm wondering if you'd want to reflect at all about how that drives you to want to think about the future of learning, since that's both, what you talked about, the Future of Learning Council, and a critical part of the conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, you know what? Absolutely. For me, that drive has never left because it's interesting. When we talk about all kids, all means all. And we don't know every day those kids are walking through the doors, what they've dealt with at home, what they're dealing with on the weekends. There's a lot of kids that Christmas break, we just got through Christmas break. That's a difficult time for them. That's one of the things where I'm so passionate about with closing schools because of the pandemic. That's so hard on kids to not be in school. Even kids that are maybe more affluent. Life is challenging and school is a safe place on many, many levels. And so for me, when I think about the future of learning, and it really comes back to, are we creating pathways for every child? If we say every child every day, and we really truly mean it, then what are we willing to do as professional educators to design those experiences, to design that instructional opportunity for kids? Because every child is different. They learn differently. They need to be able to express what they've learned differently. And then, the tackling of time and saying, we're going to set you free. You demonstrate mastery, you demonstrate proficiency, and we're going to let you move at your pace. If you can move faster, let's make that happen. If you need more time, we need to create space for you to be able to have that more time as well. And if you're gifted and you're creative, how can you express your learning that maybe is in a way that I'm used to? And I think that's one of our greatest challenges right now is how do we take the best of what we've done traditionally and blend it with this new model of learning? I'm not saying that our schools are broken, but I do believe that there's an opportunity right now to really truly design learning rather than create a structure of school. How do we design learning and then wrap school in the structure of school, including seat time and grading and all those other buses and athletics, wrap those things around learning. And that's a passionate part of what I do and why I do it.
I really appreciate that you brought up the learning versus school, because I've heard you mention that a few times. And the first time I heard it, I didn't quite register with me. But then I think one time I had you explain it, and when you did, I was like, oh, it was like a floodgate moment for me in understanding some of the other concepts that we discussed, the Future of Learning Council and the work group. And I'm just wondering if you could give us, our listeners, a little bit of a definition there, learning versus school, at least the way that you see it.
Yeah, for me, it's just really quick. When you concentrate, when you focus on the learning, you really look at every child in regards to student agency, creating opportunities for them to have the voice and choice in their learning, co-authoring their learning experiences. And the lens isn't about the bell schedule. It isn't about compliance in regards to the structure of what we've always done. Well, that's just the way we do things. It's got to fit inside this box. And really, when you focus on learning, there is no box. There is a creative canvas where you start to design and you say, we know this child. We have more data. We have more information on every child today than we ever have. How do we create and differentiate for that child to create their success going forward so that they can be intrinsically motivated to be a part of the learning experience and not just receivers? It's incredible. When kids begin to co-author their learning, you see the level of engagement just go through the roof. And that's because they're like, you're saying I have a voice, that I can participate, learn, know what I know, express what I don't know, and then lay out a plan for me. That's how could I not want to be a part of that? And that's the difference. School, we can do school. We know how to do school. Everybody knows how to do school. You can change schedules. You can, look at tardy rules and attendance rules and all of that all day long. You're not going to impact student learning if you don't start tackling the learning side of that conversation.
Yes, thank you. That was a great definition. What I'm hearing you say that I really like is that learning that's the heart of it all. That is an individual child's growth and development through education. That's like the stuff that teachers love. That's what drew you to education. That's what draws probably everybody to education, that really has that calling. And school is the system. School is the system that's in place and the structures in place that, at its heart is trying to achieve that goal. But the whole point of this discussion that we're having today, and I assume your work on the Future of Learning Council, is how can we, now that we have all these new ways to do things, how can we rethink that system to more authentically honor and facilitate at scale that vision of a student co-authoring their education for every child?
And yeah, absolutely. And what's exciting, Nikki, very honestly, just in this conversation that we've had today, you now can go and have that conversation with your network, with the people that you know as other parents or friends, and they say, well, tell me about that. Now you can talk them through, and then pretty soon it spreads, right? It's kind of the cooties game, and everybody kind of goes, you know what? That is a great way to look at learning in school and structure school. And then they reflect on their own environment and they think about their own kids and they go, well, is my kid being exposed to that? Is that what's happening for my child? And if it is, that's amazing. If it isn't, let's talk about that. And the whole goal is to really get people thinking through that process. And you now are part of that evangelist of saying, let's talk about learning. And so that's pretty exciting.
So today we're going to be talking about 3 ways to think outside the box to reinvent learning. And we've hinted at some of this, but I want to pause to break down a few things first and just dig into the why a little bit. I actually just had a conversation a couple weeks ago about burnout, right? And we're seeing high rates of burnout in educators, period, teachers, administrators. But this therapist that I spoke to, her name's Molly Davis, she was talking about how even though it's obviously very difficult, burnout can be a catalyst for change. Because when you start seeing those signs as an individual, right, for your own life, but also we were talking about, as a system, when you start seeing this at this level, it can be a catalyst for, okay, something needs to be different. What are your reflections with that? Like some of the challenges we're seeing and that teachers and administrators are facing. Does that speak to the story of wanting to innovate, change?
Absolutely. So this would be my response. I do believe that this is a window of opportunity, right? And I understand that the burnout, I talk to superintendents and staff members every day who are dealing with some of the insanity of, what's going on within public schools and even the external forces. I keep wondering, and this is just a wondering, I keep wondering if we are spending a tremendous amount of our time and energy keeping the old system alive. Meaning, we're juggling all of these challenges to keep a traditional model in place when maybe there's opportunity to hit a pressure release valve and flip the script and say, you know what, we're not going to worry about seat time as much as we have been. We're going to realize that kids are going to be embracing mobility on and off campus. So it doesn't matter if you're face-to-face or you're virtual. We're going to design digital ecosystems, and we're going to design our environment that allows you to quickly toggle between face-to-face and online without it being this life-changing event, without it being such an emotional. I strongly believe, Nikki, that there are many, many of us in the field going through a grieving process right now, no different than the 5 stages of grief that we go through in life when someone passes away. And I think you're seeing it. I think you could label it. And there's probably Molly, is it Davis, could look at this and say, you know what, let's identify the 5 stages. Is there anger? Is there denial? When do we get to acceptance, which is the 5th stage, right? I feel like we're going through the grieving stages over the traditional model of school. And it would be interesting if we were to unpack that and to say, are there things in each of these that we can let go? And you've heard me refer to it as organized abandonment, right? When do we intentionally look at that traditional model and say, do we really need to spend as much time and energy on this piece that we are? Because if we can let go of that, that creates space and time and capacity for us to focus on the things that are new challenges for us, new issues that we need to deal with. So I think that there's definitely an emotional relationship there. William Bridges has a book where he really talks about, in order for there to be a new beginning, there has to be an end. So in order for there to be a sunrise, you had to have a sunset. And it's true in relationships, and it's true in designs and systems thinking, right? How do we go through the process of letting go so that we can launch new and exciting opportunities right now as well?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like the metaphor of the pressure release valve because, it doesn't seem right that we could just add more to what is already like a huge, a lot of pressure on teachers and administrators in our system, and so I think that question of what aren't we going to do is an important one, because I think everybody's feeling the pressure of another thing. So it's a good frame for us to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And imagine if you had a leader who said, I'm going to make it okay for us to stop doing things. What? Like what? Well, you tell me, what could we stop doing right now that we don't necessarily have to do every day? And sometimes, and I've talked with some superintendents about this, sometimes you have to have courage over compliance. And how do we look at the courageous pieces right now and then tackle the compliance stuff?
Yeah, I imagine I've read somebody posted a few years ago, the day in the life of the teacher, and just you look at the list of just all the things that they're juggling on a daily basis. I'm sure you've seen that, but it's a lot. And so I imagine if somebody came to them and said, what on this list do you believe in your heart, is not important for us to do every day? Or if it is important, one thing that we might think about is if it's important, but you can't do it all, how do we innovate the system so that we bring in additional people and supports to help you so it's not all on you?
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, so let's talk about the why. And specifically, let's talk about why is it so important that we think outside the box to reinvent learning, and why now?
Well, the why now for me really comes back to the fact or the reality that society has a new ask of us as educators. I think the pandemic really exposed some of the gaps, but it also really lifted up the reality that choice is here to stay. And not just choice in regards to which district you attend or if you go public schools or charter schools, but choice in location. Kids are realizing that, hey, I can learn on campus or I can learn off campus. And parents are looking at this and saying, you know what, for my child's health and well-being, maybe they don't need to be at school at 7 a.m. in the morning. They function a little bit differently. Their clock is a little different. They can get up and take that first class online, but then they'll be on campus for these 3 or 4 classes, and then or during band season they want a different schedule. So I think the flexibility and the mobility piece is really being embraced everywhere, and schools are realizing if we want to be thriving, we have to figure out how to design around mobility, flexibility in the schedules, flexibility in the location. How do we embed community in our learning? How do we allow kids a lot of different ways to demonstrate learning and proficiency? The other part of it is we know that disruptions, the pandemic was disruptive, but there are a lot of other disruptions that are on the horizons, like artificial intelligence. The landscape is changing so fast that the why, we have to have a healthy sense of urgency to do this work. And again, it's not that our schools are broken. This isn't criticizing or saying, we've been doing it all wrong. Like any other industry, though, it's time for us to redefine what learning looks like.
I'm Nikki Herta, and you're listening to Bright, stories of hope and innovation in Michigan classrooms. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, ensuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. Today, I'm chatting with Dr. Dave Richards, an executive learning strategist for Michigan Virtual, former superintendent of Fraser Public Schools, and one of the founding members of the Future of Learning Council, a group of Michigan school leaders dedicated to redefining learning to better meet the needs of our students. Up next, we dive into Dave's top 3 strategies for reinventing learning in your school community. All right, let's dig in. So what are the top 3 practical strategies you have to offer us on ways to think outside the box to rethink education?
Well, number one for me, first and foremost, and this is probably the teacher in me, I always encourage leaders to, if you lead, you must read. And that means you have to stay current. I always like to say, I use the term futurescaping. As a leader, you have to constantly be scanning the horizon and to have an idea of what's coming, because everyone in the organization is counting on you to cast the vision. And part of that is reading enough things, watching enough, listening, talking, building your personal network out, being in the room where people are having these conversations, so that when someone asks you, how are we doing? You not only can give them an idea of where we're headed, you also give them hope about how exciting it's going to be to go in that direction. So reading, staying current, and really building out that network and saying, who do I need to talk to? Again, that's where the Future Learning Council to me is a powerful opportunity, because we get people in the room, and even though you're not comfortable initially maybe having some of these conversations, we're going to make each other better.
I'm curious if you could just give us a teaser. Do you got a couple titles that have recently influenced you in the past few years that you just want to recommend to everybody?
Yeah, you know what? I actually do, and that's something I could add. Anything that is connected to developing global competencies, Michael Folan's work is fantastic, where they're really truly talking about what does it mean to be a productive and contributing member of society. We talk about it all the time, but what does that look like? I read a lot of reports out of Christensen Institute, Knowledge Works Foundation, Getting Smart, Tom Vander Ark, Rebecca Middles. A lot of the work that they're doing is really talking about next level, next generation learning models. So those are resources always to have at your fingertips. Get it in your inbox. It's easy. Click, scan, sign up. Folks are producing some great content right now. One book I would just say is a staple, and I would encourage others to share this with their teams, is Inevitable, Mass Customized Learning by Chuck Schwan. That's one, it's a quick read, but it will unsettle a traditional model thinking.
All right, want to lead us into number 2, your second strategy?
So number 2, I talked about this a little bit already, creating a healthy sense of urgency. To me, that as a strategy, you can do that without having people feel like you're going to dismantle the system. A healthy sense of urgency says, I know that we need to do something. I know that this has some gaps in it. What we're doing has some gaps in it. How we do that, what it looks like, that's that sense of urgency. We can't just keep kicking the can down the road. If we're going to make changes, it's up to me. I had a band teacher who always used to say with the kids, and they would all yell it out, if it's to be, it's up to me, meaning I have to own the change. If I want to see positive change, I've got to be the one that steps into the arena. And as a leader, you have to create a safe place, but at the same time, you have to say, we're not going to settle for good enough. We're not going to settle for, well, that's the way we always do it. And that takes some risk because not everybody likes to be nudged constantly. And you have to constantly nudge people and say, can we improve on that? It's continuous improvement. And so that healthy sense of urgency is a big part of, that's got to be a part of your identity, your makeup as a leader.
How do you straddle the line between a healthy sense of urgency in a way that's productive and makes people inspired to want to change and improve, and panic and shame?
First and foremost, it's a positive conversation, right? There's so much great work that's happening. You celebrate those success, but you create that tension by saying, or casting that vision and talking about where are there opportunities for us to improve that? It's just like organized abandonment. What are some things that we could stop doing? So there's some hope there. You mean you're going to take something off my plate? I am, because it's going to create space for us to look at this challenge a little bit differently. Are there other ways? And that's where the shared vision and the shared leadership really comes in. It's incredible when you get a team of teachers together and say, do we understand the problem? Yes. Rather than just me solving this, how would we solve this? And they tackle it. And it's incredible to see the solutions they come up with as a team, as an administrative team. So I think that tension is healthy, not because we're failing. It's not because we're not doing our jobs. It's tension because we're saying we have a new problem that requires a new solution. And together, we just really think a lot better than if it's just one of us trying to solve it.
And would you say that this healthy sense of urgency, part of that is engaging the community and building that sense of urgency in the community? And would you be able to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the community piece is so important. What times I've seen challenges for districts has been when the central office has been the only one that knew where they were going. And then the community, it feels like everything is being done to the community and they're on the receiving end without ever being a part of sharing and talking about it, getting engaged in the process. That's where my first hire, I believe, as a superintendent was a communications person, because we had to tell our story every day. As educators, we're not really good at that. We don't do a good job of bragging. We don't do a good job of saying, here's why we're doing what we're doing and how all these pieces fit together. And so what ends up happening is people become disenfranchised. They become disconnected because they don't understand it. And you know this, Nikki. If people don't have information, they make it up. And just because they want to say oh, this is what I think is going on, well, pretty soon that becomes the truth and their perception becomes the reality. And you're going, that's not what's happening at all. That's not why we're doing this. So engaging the community, engaging the staff together, and that's where you have to every day be diligent and talk about why we're doing what we're doing, how it's all connected. Do people understand what they're doing, and do they understand why they're doing it? That there's relationship between all the work. And that's where that healthy part stays, because people aren't I don't feel threatened. I know it's a big challenge. I know we have a lot of work to do, but I don't feel threatened. So let's keep going.
Yeah, that's one thing that has really amazed me that I just didn't ever think about as someone who, has never been a superintendent or school leader. How much of it is communicating with the community and also the school community, right? And it's storytelling, and trying to instill that vision and show here's what it can give your child, like here are the things we want for your child and you want for your child, and here's how this other slightly different thing that might seem a little scary at first because it's different can help that, can give them that, and getting everybody on board for that. And I never considered that aspect of school leadership, but it does seem very important.
It's huge. And I will tell you, one of the goals I always had, it didn't matter if you were a building principal, drove a school bus, cleaned a hallway, served lunches. You need to have an understanding of our mission and our vision. Because if you're someplace with your friends in the summertime, let's say it's a classroom teacher, and you're sitting around the campfire and somebody says, hey, tell me what's going on in your school district, and you don't have a healthy conversation about, we're excited. Really, it's been challenging. We've got a lot of things that we're coming up against, but we're on the right path. We're doing great things for kids, and here's why. That's a hit to all of us. If that conversation is, oh man, it's a mess, and we're just, I don't know where we're at, and the superintendent's just off in left field and has no idea what's going on in my classroom, what's happening. We're only as strong as that conversation. So each of us should be able to have it. And, we talked about Fraser earlier. For me, the point of pride was it didn't stop. The work has continued, and people are still doing the work. And that's exciting because it wasn't just about Dave. Dave left, and there wasn't even a speed bump. People kept doing the work. That's exciting.
It's very exciting. And I also think a testament to the leadership that you demonstrated. I know you're being humble, but in preparing and making sure it wasn't just your vision, that it was a shared vision. All right, want to lead us into number 3?
Yeah, number 3 is an easy one. In fact, it's a great segue from what we just talked about. You have to hire amazing people. Just make sure that you build a team and know that, not everybody, you don't want everybody's like you as a leader, but hire and empower amazing people. And it is incredible to watch. Once they know that they can drive the vision and truly, truly have the responsibility to do this work, everybody lights up. And that's when, at the building level, in the classrooms, doesn't matter. I could walk up to a head custodian at Fraser High School and they could tell me exactly why we're doing what we're doing. I could go to the operations and maintenance director and he understands the learning conversation and why we need green walls in every building so that kids can create videos, right? And he's looking for opportunities of saying, this would really help us get our learning for kids, furniture and flexible furnishings. I don't have to do all that work. He's doing it. And I'm just complimenting and supporting. And he comes to me and I just say yes, And so hiring great people and empowering them and then get out of their way is an incredible, I think, strategy for any leader. And I know that's one that a lot of people know, but always put that top of mind.
Obviously, right now there are some significant hiring challenges with teacher recruitment and retention and just in education in general. So obviously, that would make it more challenging for someone. The thing I'm wondering is it always about somebody being, amazing at the start, or is it about creating the kind of culture that is like when people are trusted and when they are empowered and a part of the vision that they will want to, like you said, they light up? What do you think about that?
Well, I think the challenge right now is definitely having a difficult time hiring people, but there's also a huge challenge in retaining people, getting people to not walk away from the profession. We're seeing that on a national level where people are saying it's not worth it. There were some articles recently talking about how the retirement system has changed significantly, and people are like, I can just move my 401k to another field. I'm going to leave education completely. So as a leader, you're now being challenged with, how do I retain the talent that I have so they don't opt out, and at the same time make sure that we're creating an environment where people want to be a part of our team. So it's twofold, and I do believe that the shared vision piece goes a long way. And having people say, you know what, I love this district, I want to be here, good things are happening, this too shall pass, we'll get through this storm. And, we'll get back to the things that we're most passionate about. But retaining people right now is a big challenge as well.
Yeah. And my heart really goes out to, teachers and school leaders, just with all the challenges that they're facing. So I'm not, I don't think either of us are trying to suggest that any of this is easy, especially right now. Just saying that it's, at the heart of it, here's what really matters.
Yeah. Never a more difficult time in education than right now. I talk to leaders every day, and it's incredible the internal and external pressures that they're under and the situations they're having to deal with. It's been politicized on so many levels. And the hard part is that the local school district is often the only avenue for people to express their political frustrations. And so people are really feeling that. Instead of getting back to one question we should all be asking every day is what's best for kids? And then how do we design for that?
Could you tell me about a student who touched your heart and changed the way that you think about education?
I'm going to give you a quick story, I promise. And it's actually a group of students. When I first came to Fraser High School, they were in the process of remodeling the school. And an interior courtyard was going to turn into a hallway. And so you get from one side of the building to the other. And it was about the size of 2 classrooms, but they were going to just box it in, right? And I went to the superintendent and I said, is there any way I could have that space? And he said, yes, but there's no money. You can have the space, do whatever you want in that hallway. And so through volunteers, we put up walls like Extreme Home Makeover, boarded the area off so kids couldn't see what we were doing on the inside. And through volunteers and donations, we built basically a Panera environment inside of those doors, right? And nobody could see it. And we got it all done. We got our lights from Taco Bell. A dad donated the tile floor, and we called it the Fraser Cafe. The Frey Cafe is what the kids named it afterwards. So over the weekend, we take the walls down. And on Monday morning, the kids come in from the buses. And we're standing inside, and we have, a party, balloons, and there's cake in there. 7 o'clock in the morning, we're going to feed kids cake and get them jacked up on sugar because that's what we do. And the kids... Nikki, you have to understand this. And there was a lot of resistance to this. We didn't put any doors on this. And there were staff that said, I can't believe you're not putting doors on this. You're going to destroy it. Kids are this is not going to last. And we said, no. This is about the kids. We want them to have a place that's theirs. But this is a true story, Nikki. The kids walked up to the edge of this room, this hallway that now was a cafe, counters, mirrors, cool setting, and they wouldn't step onto the tile because, and this is the part that always gets me. I'm looking at these kids, and there's 50 kids on both sides of this hallway, looking at the cake, looking at the balloons. And I said, guys, what are you doing? And they're like, Doc, that looks amazing. Who's it for? It's for you. What? It's for you. This is yours. Come get in here. But they wouldn't step onto the tile. And there was nothing holding them back. And so culture-wise, that what touched my heart, that's what taught me if we create those spaces with kids at the front of that decision, you can change an entire community. From that day forward, there was a different feel that kids were like, they love us here. They care about us. They're doing these things for us. That's my story.
That gave me goosebumps because it's just the metaphor. It's a real thing, and it's also symbolic. That's waiting at the threshold of the shiny room. Could you tell me about a teacher that had an impact on your life?
My goodness. Honestly, well, I started our conversation by telling you how many teachers had an impact on my life. But I'll
give you permission to just pick one, and we'll acknowledge that there are so many that you could talk about in that.
Yeah.
Just because you didn't pick them doesn't mean that they didn't have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I will pick on one couple because they're a husband and wife that Kent and Linda France. They're retired now. They live about 15 minutes from my house where I am right now. And they were just incredible. They guided me all the way through school, knew my family, knew my situation, and they were champions and cheerleaders for me of saying, listen, you can do this, you can do whatever you want. Even after high school, even after I went off and was kind of finding my way. I mean, straight out of high school, I was driving a truck. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be a semi driver. And they're like, you have a lot of other abilities. Would you like to keep trying? And guided me into college. And to this day, it's been amazing. I was able to come back and speak at their retirement dinners and just tell them how much I love them. And it's like that. That's the power of being in education, the relationships. And there are educators, teachers, anyone that hears this that says, I've got that same story, because that's what it's about. And it's relationships. It's kids know you care about them, and it changes their lives. You truly have a legacy of changing people's lives. Not many careers can say that. I talked to a good friend of mine. He's like, yeah, you've had a whole career of making an impact. I do this. I produce widgets. It's not changing anything. And you're right. I'm very, very fortunate that I went down the path that I did, because that's the legacy, is you can change lives doing this work.
Without a doubt, it's challenging work. To redefine your vision for learning, to get your school community's input and buy-in, and to bring into reality a system that allows each and every student to be the co-authors of their own education. But with leaders like Dave forging our path forward, if there's one thing we're certain of, it's that the future is bright. If you know someone who's an inspiring Michigan educator who should be featured on our show, send us an email at bright@michiganvirtual.org to let us know who they are and why we should interview them. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Bright, stories of hope and innovation in Michigan classrooms. This podcast is produced by Herbie Gaylord, is hosted by me, Nikki Herda, and is shaped by many of our passionate and talented colleagues. Big thanks to Krista Green, Cassie Harris, Anna Boyer, Sarah Hill, and Brandon Batista for their contributions to this episode. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, insuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. The Bright podcast is made possible by Michigan Virtual, a nonprofit organization that's leading and collaborating to build learning environments for tomorrow. Education is changing faster than ever. Discover new models and resources to move learning forward at your school at michiganvirtual.org.